Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The United Nations Security Council is discussing handing over authority to the Iraqis after June 30th. Washington and London presents a new draft resolution that would terminate the presence of the United States-led multinational forces in Iraq by January 2006. France, Germany, Russia, China and other countries are demanding the full transfer of authority to the new Iraqi government. The draft resolution calls for holding democratic elections by January of next year. Also to choose a national interim council to form an interim government to set an outline for a permanent constitution. The United States of America and Britain are in the decisive chapter of their diplomatic battle to convince the United Nations with their political vision for Iraq. Their previous draft resolution to the Security Council was rejected. Today, they are presenting a revised resolution giving the new Iraqi government more authority. However, it does not clearly state in detail the extent of the Iraqi sovereignty.
I think we've had a good
discussion in the Security Council concerning the second draft. The U.S. and Britain accommodated many of the suggestions made by the members of the Security Council. I believe that the work is not complete.
The most important points of the revised resolution are the interim Iraqi government's control of the army and the police, ending the command of the multinational forces, and overseeing the country's security and stability by 2006. The revised resolution, however, is not succeeding in convincing member countries of the Security Council. They fear that the United States is pressuring them into making a political decision that would act as a United Nations umbrella to the American occupation and would authorize the presence of the United States forces indefinitely. In a closed session, France objected to the revised draft, demanding more clarification. China stated that the new resolution does not fully comply with the demands for sovereignty. Meanwhile, Algeria clearly noted that the revised resolution should clearly give Iraqis the final say over the multinational forces.
It's really an issue that we need to.
The issue now is we need to create a partnership with the multinational forces and the Iraqi government, meaning establishing a relationship between two sovereign institutions, a relationship between the countries participating in the multinational forces and the Iraqi government. Both sides will discuss the issue.
The Iraqi Foreign Minister, Hoshyar Zuberi, is embarking on a difficult mission in the Security Council, demanding full sovereignty for the Iraqis. Member countries in the Security Council will listen to the United Nations envoy Lakhdar al-Ibrahimi and officials from the new Iraqi government. The initial United States-British draft resolution set a timetable for a democratic transfer, which would depend on conducting elections for an interim parliament in 2005, draft a new constitution for the country, and vote on it within the same year, and elect a new government late December 2005. The interim Iraqi government is waiting to take its first steps without crossing the red lines. The biggest gamble, however, will be on the Iraqi politicians and people's ability to overcome a complex situation created by a bloody history.
Starting with Baghdad, the area was rocked by more attacks. At least 4 people were killed and at least 30 others wounded, including 5 children, when a car blew up in a busy northern Baghdad neighborhood on Wednesday. The burnt-out shell of a car was left on the busy street in the Azamiya district. Several of the wounded were still lying stunned on the ground at least 15 minutes after the explosion. It was not immediately clear if the car had been used as a bomb or if a roadside bomb had exploded next to it. A series of car bombs have detonated in Baghdad in recent days in the build-up to Tuesday's naming of an interim government to take over from the US-led authorities on June 30. Meanwhile, clashes erupted between U.S. occupation forces and Al-Mahdi army resistance fighters despite truce agreement. 6 people were killed in the clashes and 23 others were injured. In Kufa, south of Baghdad, overnight clashes left 5 people dead and 11 injured. In the twin holy city of Najaf, 3 mortar shells killed 1 person and injured 12 in an industrial zone close to a U.S. military base. A spokesman for Sayyid Muqtada Sadr's office in Najaf accused the U.S. military of violating the truce and opening fire at the Kufa mosque. Meanwhile, in Baghdad, Sadr city, Mahdi army fighters engaged in firefight with U.S. occupation soldiers and then attacked with mortar shells a U.S. military base in the Rashad neighborhood. 2 people were killed in the fighting. Saudi Oil Minister Ali Al-Nuaimi said in Beirut the weekend attack in his country did not affect its oil and gas production and has so far prompted only 10 foreigners to flee Saudi Arabia. Nuaimi told the conference on the eve of an OPEC extraordinary ministerial meeting in Beirut that Riyadh and OPEC aim to bring down soaring oil prices to between $22 and $28 a barrel. Shortly after the announcement, red-hot oil prices cooled slightly.
World oil prices soared close to record high levels on Wednesday as OPEC producers, under heavy pressure from consumers to raise production, gathered in Beirut for OPEC's 131st meeting, overshadowed by a weekend attack in Saudi Arabia. Crude oil prices surged $2.45 to a record closing price of $42.33 a barrel in New York, and analysts were prompted to brand the market as being in a panicking psychological mood. European Union Finance Minister late Tuesday expressed concern that skyrocketing oil prices could jeopardize Europe's fledgling economic recovery, calling on OPEC again to act to calm the market. The price surge came despite expectations that OPEC producers meeting in Beirut Thursday will agree to raise the cartel's output quota of 23.5 million barrels per day in response to record high prices. OPEC president told reporters in the Lebanese capital that the oil cartel had the ability to increase production by 12%. Qatari energy minister said ahead of the meeting OPEC had reached new consensus to raise its crude oil production, adding that the organization would do everything it can to calm the market. Saudi oil minister Ali Al-Nuaimi told reporters OPEC will do its best to make the fundamentals right, and the head of the Iraqi delegation at the meeting said OPEC will likely decide a strong increase in its crude oil output.
The Arab world will be demanded according to these expectations to produce between 40 to 45 million barrels per day by year 2025, somehow double the amount produced currently. From this perspective, the kingdom is working along with the OPEC countries to settle the prices in its limited price range of $22 to $28 per barrel. Here I would like to say that opposite to what some believe, the OPEC countries cannot always control the oil prices. OPEC's role is limited to reaching a balance between supply and demand in the crude oil market, but the market decides on the prices.
For its part, the United Arab Emirates already said it will increase oil production this month by 400,000 barrels per day over its OPEC quota to help ease record prices. But traders are worried that any extra oil may come too late to ward off shortages of gasoline in the United States during the peak summer period, and are also fearful of disruption to Saudi Arabian supplies.
A short while ago, the Maronite Bishops' Council, chaired by Patriarch Cardinal Nasrallah Boutros Fehr, regretted Thursday's bloodshed, which they said only reflected socio-economic hardships. Bishops lashed out at state officials for, in their words, not tackling the economic crisis. 2 suspected militants shot at U.S. military personnel in the Saudi Arabian capital just days after a major Al-Qaeda attack in the country killed 22 people, mainly foreigners. Security sources said no one was hurt in the latest incident outside the vast, heavily fortified Iskan American military compound. They said a convoy of cars carrying U.S. and Saudi personnel was leaving the compound when the gunmen shot at one car. In a separate incident, Saudi forces killed 2 gunmen after clashes in the western city of Ta'if. Dubai-based Al Arabiya television said the 2 men were wanted terrorists, but that they were not linked to the weekend shooting rampage in the eastern city of Khubar, the second major attack on the oil industry in a month. Fears that militant attacks will destabilize Saudi Arabia drove crude prices to record highs in the biggest jump in more than a year. But red-hot oil prices cooled slightly after OPEC kingpin Saudi Arabia said it was ready to boost output to bring down prices. Saudi Oil Minister Ali Al-Nuaimi said ahead of an OPEC meeting in Beirut, the kingdom was fully ready to increase production in an effort to return prices to OPEC's target range of $22 to $28 a barrel. The price of benchmark Brent North Sea crude oil for delivery in July fell 43 cents a barrel to $38.65 in London. Saudi Oil Minister Al-Nuaimi said in Lebanon the weekend terror attack in Khubar did not affect Riyadh's oil and gas production and has so far prompted only 10 foreigners to flee Saudi Arabia.
OPEC ministers arriving in Beirut are under pressure to curb surging oil prices. OPEC producers said an expected deal in Lebanon on Thursday to hoist crude output limits may fail to quell the fears of rising world oil prices. Ministers from the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries meeting here on Thursday said that they were running short of ammunition to force down prices. OPEC is considering lifting supply quotas by 2 million to 2.5 million barrels daily, a rise of 8 to 11%. Kuwait's oil minister said on Tuesday his country was increasing oil installation security and was coordinating with fellow Gulf producers to protect against attacks. U.S. oil prices struck new heights above $42 a barrel on Wednesday. The latest rally to 21-year peaks has raised doubts about whether an increase in supplies from the OPEC producers' cartel will be enough to tame prices. U.S. light crude hit $42.45 a barrel, the highest since futures were launched in New York in 1983. London's benchmark Brent crude slipped 38 cents to 38.70 a barrel. European Union finance ministers had expressed concerns at surging oil prices that could stifle Europe's fledgling recovery and called on OPEC ministers in Beirut to act to calm the market. A Gulf industry source said in Beirut, OPEC kingpin Saudi Arabia is currently producing 9.1 million barrels of oil a day.
In other news, Hamas has welcomed an Israeli plan to withdraw from the Gaza Strip after talks in Lebanon with Hezbollah. Hamas said in a statement, exiled officials met Hezbollah leader Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah to discuss Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's plan for pulling troops and settlers out of Gaza. But the group made clear a pullout should not be at the expense of keeping other occupied land. Hamas has said it could suspend attacks from Gaza if Israel evacuated the Strip. Sharon voiced confidence on his pullout plan would be adopted by his cabinet. The U.S. warned it will reject any alternative. Sarah Khoury has more.
Troops said they killed 2 gunmen as they approached a border checkpoint between Israel and Gaza on Wednesday. The bloodshed came as Prime Minister Ariel Sharon fought rivals in his cabinet in a battle to push through his Gaza pullout plan. In the West Bank, Israeli army jeeps cut off access to President Yasser Arafat's headquarters. They blocked access roads to Arafat's compound in Ramallah, stoking fears of an attack against the Palestinian leader who has been effectively confined to his residence and offices for 2.5 years by occupation troops. They later pulled back. Sharon had said he was no longer bound to a promise to Washington that he would not harm the Palestinian leader physically. In other violence, a Palestinian civilian was killed by helicopter fire during an Israeli army raid. Another 7 Palestinians, including a 5-year-old boy and his mother, were wounded during the raid in Kabatia. 3 Palestinians were detained. In a separate incident, Israeli troops wounded a Palestinian activist trying to enter a Jewish colony in the Gush Katif area in southern Gaza. A Palestinian security source said 2 school children were hurt, one seriously, when they were hit by fire from an Israeli tank that slammed their classroom in the Tal Sultan neighborhood in Rafah, southern Gaza. Sharon, boosted by high opinion poll rating, was turning to Egypt and the United States to help him push through his troubled plan to pull out of Gaza. President George W. Bush already expressed support for the project. The original plan was rejected by members of the premier's own right-wing Likud party. Finance Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Sharon's arch-rival within Likud, has been leading the opposition to the plan. Sharon had initially planned to withdraw all 21 of the Gaza settlements, but his new plan will involve an initial limited evacuation, with further phases subjected to later cabinet votes.
Suspected militants shot at U.S. military personnel in Saudi Arabia. The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh said the gunmen had fired at 2 cars carrying U.S. personnel along a highway outside Riyadh. No Americans were hurt in this shooting. The militants were armed with automatic rifles and that they had fled after the shooting. In a separate incident, Saudi forces said they had killed 2 gunmen after clashes the day before in the western city of Ta'if. A statement by the Interior Ministry said the 2 were linked to the Khobar hostage-taking incident last week in which 22 people were killed. Pictures from the Saudi state TV station Al-Akhbariya showed bodies being delivered by helicopter after the militants had opened fire and thrown grenades at police who were on their trail. OPEC made a renewed bid to wrestle world oil prices lower by opening the taps wide. The move came at the beginning of the cartel's meeting in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, even before an expected decision to raise formal output limits. The United Arab Emirates said it was immediately realizing an additional 400,000 barrels daily this month, complementing 700,000 barrels already on the way from Saudi Arabia. The extra crude is being pumped irrespective of any official decision by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries on higher supply quotas to start tomorrow in Beirut. OPEC attempts to contain the price spike have been complicated by Saturday's deadly militant attack against the Saudi oil city Khobar. Saudi Oil Minister Ali Al-Nuaimi said the rocketing oil price was the result of various factors.
Today's price has really nothing to do with fundamentals of the oil market. The price is heated today because of many, many reasons. You may call it terrorism, you may call it expectation of destruction of oil and gas facilities in producing areas and so forth. But increasing production does not help this perception. However, eventually people will see that fundamentals are in balance and therefore prices hopefully will stabilize.
The Palestinian refugees are living a new catastrophe after the Israeli occupation forces demolished a number of homes in different areas of Rafah. Nearly 2,000 people have been left homeless, most of whom are children, living in the new refugee center like playgrounds and schools in tough conditions, waiting to live in new homes. Indeed, the events that took place in Rafah are a human disaster, a new catastrophe in the series of catastrophes that hit the Palestinian people. However, more painful and sad is the scene of innocent children wearing ragged clothes as they try to lead normal lives in their new refugee center, where their families are taking shelter. Meanwhile, the conditions of their new life is tough. They do not know what their future holds for them as they take their final exams of the school year.
We can't study because of the raids. We stay at home with our books, but we can't study here or at home because our home was destroyed. The exams that were supposed to be today have been postponed until June 6. They gave us 10 days to study at home and at school.
At this school, 8 families are living here, whose homes were destroyed in the Brazil neighborhood. Most of them are children, taking shelter in classrooms. At least 21 people sleep in one room. These families never imagined a day when their homes would be demolished, since their houses are hundreds of meters away from the border. However,